Trapped by the belief that I'm not good enough, bound by the limitations and the lies that consumed my world, this was me. It wasn't until I took the biggest leap in my life to know and trust the power within. And it was at that moment I made a choice. My past will not define me anymore. Hello, I am Teri Cardula, and I know I am not alone in this. Over the years, I have found that the number one mistake that we make is that we get in the way of our own success story. Yes, I said it. On this show, together we'll tackle limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, getting stuck, fear, doubt, overwhelm, and the imposter syndrome. Join us on this journey designed to transport you beyond your limitations to a world where anything is possible. This is Talking with Teri. Hello, and welcome back to Talking with Teri, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And today's guest is Becca Ribbing. Super excited. We were talking offline, and I think we should have probably started recording there because we were talking about some really interesting nuggets and facts, right? That might be fun sometime, is just to do some interesting nuggets. Becca is the author of the Clarity Journal and has been a coach for over a decade. She's on a mission to help people break out of the cycles of uncertainty and struggle. Man, we are going to dive in and we're going to talk about this. But first, Becca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really loved our conversation before this, but I'm sure it's just going to keep going.
Okay, so I want to hear, kind of a little bit of a backstory, just of how you got to be where you're at today. So that way the listeners can just kind of hear how you came to be.
So I've been a coach for quite a long time, and I really specialize in helping people kind of make difficult job transitions. If you're in one industry and you really want to switch to another industry, or you're not sure what you want to do next, I really love helping people through that process because, when you're in the middle of feeling stuck where you are, it's like soul deadening. You don't have any energy. It is. And so then it's like really rewarding because when someone contacts me 3 months after they get a job and I'm like, I love this still. It's like, oh, see, I like tangibly helped someone feel better.
You even in this last 2 years, there's been such a wake up call for a lot of people that were, kind of not, stuck in an industry or a profession or a job title that kind of, like you said, kind of left them soul, feeling like the soul sucking job that needs to be transformed. So I'm certain that you've been seeing a lot more of that.
I have, but one of the other exciting things is because the job market is so good, it doesn't take me very long to help people get a job in another industry, It's really
offline and see. I have some positions in my other company that we can fill.
I love it. Yeah, it's just been so nice because normally the interview process is very regimented, and it's still pretty regimented, but employers are looking outside the box a little bit more. So it's easier to make that change. I highly encourage anyone who's been thinking about making a change. This is the time to do it because I have never seen a job market like this. I had a client, she was a pro bono client, but she lost her job and single mom. So I was helping her get a new one, and through no fault of her own, she actually was an hour late to her first day of her job because she ran into some crazy construction and she couldn't get there. And I'm just under normal times, they would have just said, don't bother showing up,
Yeah.
And they were just so happy she had actually showed. And
that's interesting, right? It's amazing when the tables get turned, and I think that employers are, being more lenient on things that like you said, made have been a no deal, because the job market is so different right now. Holy buckets, it really has transitioned. And in my other company, we went 9 months without a front desk person because we just could not find them. And usually when we interview prior to pandemic, we would
And even leading up to probably the first 6 months into the pandemic, we would post and we would get over 100 applicants within the first hour. And so we would like shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. And now I think we had to post, I don't know, months, and we might have gotten one here and one there, and like,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
like a entry level position. It's not like it was a skilled position, and so it has really impacted the job market. And everyone I speak to, and you've even seen it, like the restaurants, on you have these signs that says, we're trying to do the best that we can. So I'm not really sure like where the people went. But it's really kind of an interesting dynamic that's happened and that we're being faced with right now.
Well, I think one thing that the media isn't really talking about as much is a lot of people retired over the pandemic. Older people, like there actually is the job market is smaller than it was 2 years ago because people who were in their 70s, like late 60s, 70s, 80s, who were kind of having to eke through it, were just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not putting my life at stake with
Yeah.
COVID. And so the job market really did shrink. And
Okay, that makes sense.
then
Okay, that's another
the
out.
jobs that need to be filled shrank for a while too. A lot of restaurants closed during the beginning of the pandemic and stuff. But
Yeah, a lot of the
now
business,
that it's
yeah, a lot of businesses went out of business, and then
right, but now that it's back,
you had
like,
like I heard that the other day there's a 400% increase in gig work. So folks that had left the job market and started doing their own thing, where that's entrepreneurial in multi-level marketing sorts of things, like any type of like kind of their side gigs, if you will,
right.
became kind of the forefront. And so I think combination of all those factors like hitting at the same time like is kind of where we're at today. You know,
Yeah. Well, and then also a lot of moms have dropped out of the workforce too because they
yeah.
just couldn't manage. I mean,
Oh yeah, true.
I've had a hard time managing, and I work for myself, so I have no boss breathing down my neck.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. That's
yeah.
another great point because like I know, like I was saying during the pandemic, like moms that had more than one child under the age of 7 totally hosed, like as far as like the ability to try to work or even work from home. Like I mean, like
Yeah,
it's just not happening. It's just not happening. So
exactly.
that makes a little bit more sense of like all these other factors that played into it and like all hitting at once. So Becca, I always like hearing like the overcomer story. Like what has been your biggest kind of barrier, challenge, or block that you've had to overcome to get to where you're at today with being able to, support other people in their journeys, in their transitions?
It's so funny because I feel like we're on this continuous process of overcoming. Like the thing that gets in your way often gets in your way more than once. And so I think that for myself, like a big thing is this piece around clarity. Like I am a firm believer that without clarity, it is really hard to have momentum because when you're feeling stuck, when you're feeling uncertain, you're often trying to tell yourself just do it. You're trying to tell yourself push through it, get it done. And because that's kind of how we're trained as kids. Like if you don't understand things at school, some people had really great teachers, but a lot of us had the experience of having a teacher who really got frustrated with us if we didn't
Yeah.
understand something, and like really just was like, well, just do it. And I think a lot of society is just telling us to just do it. And so really being mindful when I am stuck and kind of stepping back and really starting from scratch and making sure that the framework of what I am doing is what I want to be doing. That's kind of my sweet spot because I think a lot of us run into this thing where when we're stuck, when we're uncertain, when we feel anxious about what we're doing, whatever that negative emotion is that you often feel, we start letting it come out sideways. Like we'll maybe snap at our husband or our wife or the kids, or we get frustrated at someone who cut us off on the highway, instead of recognizing that as soon as we're being a little short, that's because something's not going on underlying, that we really need to like step back and figure out what we want so that we can then move forward powerfully. And so I would say I've been in that cycle multiple times in my life. And on the last cycle of that, I had a friend who was like listening to me do what everyone does. When you are stuck, you complain to your friend over and over again about the same thing.
Yeah.
They're trying to give you ideas and you're like, no, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. And finally, my friend was like, Becca, you're a coach. You help people with this every day. You're a
Yeah.
really good coach. What would you tell yourself? And I stopped and I was like, oh, you're right. And I got off the phone with her. I wrote down every question I could think of that helps get me out of my own, like get my clients out of their own heads. And as I was writing them down and answering them for myself, I just realized how important it is to look at whatever the challenge is in a different way and to get out of your rote way of thinking about it and pivot. And so that's kind of where I'm at. Like I wrote the clarity journal because of that moment. I had all these questions that I'd written down and I was like, this needs to be a book. And then but I've even since then, the funny thing about writing a book, and I'm sure you've had the same experience, you write the book and you edit it like 20 times.
Yes.
And each time I went through the editing process, I got something new from it. And I think that it's just really important to be aware that as soon as you're starting to feel stressed out, anxious, whatever it is for you that's indicating that you're stuck, that is not the time to push through. That is not the time to try to build momentum. What you need to do is build the framework of clarity so that then the momentum comes easier.
Yeah. And you're speaking about clarity. And I oftentimes will talk about being in alignment, right? When we're in alignment
Right.
with our purpose, our power, our potency, when we're in alignment with, where we're heading, and we're in, yeah, we're just all in alignment. We're all in. It is such a game changer because we can then experience all the things start to fall into place to help support us in this path. But you're absolutely right. I was on a Facebook Live a few weeks ago talking about, clarity is, I was saying clarity is queen, not clarity is king, but for all the lady listeners. But you're right. Like if you do not know the direction in which you're heading, it's easy to get distracted. It is easy to get off course. It's easy to be unmotivated. It's easy to, but when you're in alignment, you're like, oh my gosh, like this brings me joy. I wake up going, hot dog, diggity dog. I'm like doing this. There's a sense of your, like, the motivation is there because it's like, of course I'm going to do this. Of course, like, because it's in alignment. Like I get eager. I'm excited. Like I'm passionate about this. But when we're not, we don't have that clarity, when we don't have that understanding, when we don't have the information that we need, it does impact us in a bigger way. And so I love that you say, it's time to take a step back and just evaluate. Like it's okay, there's something off here. What is that? What is that for me that I'm feeling off, that I'm feeling disconnected, I'm feeling unmotivated, or whatever that might be, and showing up for us. And you're like, right, like sometimes we do go sideways, and we will be projecting onto other people our frustrations, our pains, our hurts, instead of looking within and saying, okay, what can I do to take ownership and responsibility for this and how I'm showing up?
Yeah. And I think for me, the thing that I will start telling myself when I'm feeling stuck is, I don't know. Like I will actually literally in my head say, I don't know. And it's so funny because every time I talk to someone, they're like, everyone has that phrase that they start telling themselves.
Mhm.
And it's so important because our brain is really wired to do the least amount of work possible. So if you are uncertain about what you are doing, your brain is going to throw up lots of roadblocks saying, hey, don't bother doing that until you're certain because we don't want to waste energy. And then a lot of people start telling themselves that they're procrastinating, like why aren't they like what's wrong with them? Other people are doing the work. Why aren't they doing the work? And it's really more about like getting quiet and listening to yourself and getting in alignment, as you said, because the more you can be in alignment, the less you have to do like when you're starting something, you're constantly like, okay, what do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do after that? But when you're in alignment, you kind of naturally know what the next step is along the way.
Yeah, yeah. There's a rhythm to it. There's a flow to it, if you will. So those are some great questions. Like, so when you start asking some clarity, what are some of the first questions that you might start asking yourself for that clarity, that awareness, that insight to kind of help you take yourself to the next either question or to the next awareness?
So my favorite question from the Clarity Journal is, who do you envy and what does that tell you about yourself?
Mm,
And I love that because often when we ask ourselves, it's more, who do we admire? And admiring isn't the same thing. We often admire people that we feel like we should admire, like the Dalai Lama, or, so kind of like there's usually a spiritual bent to it. And that person is kind of on a higher plane that we don't even really necessarily think we're going to ever get to.
yeah.
Whereas when we talk about who do we envy, like, oh my gosh. Well, I envy very specific people. Like if I wanted to be a writer, which I do, like I envy very specific writers who have a lifestyle or a voice that I admire and want for myself. And the more that you can really dive into that instead of pushing it away, because we're so used to pushing away envy, the more you can really analyze it, then if you come up with like multiple people, you can start to create a picture for yourself of what these facets are that are speaking to your soul so much.
Yeah, I like that. And it's not about comparing yourself to them, like
Oh,
being like me, oh, like, wow, they've achieved this. I always tell people, it's looking at them, your beginning is their middle, and
right.
so it's unfair for us to compare, but we can look up to them and envy them for what they've created, what they've brought into this world, and what can we take, what's the lessons, what's the information, what's the style, how can we emulate some of those qualities, but yet make it our own, like make
Right.
it truly our own, because I think sometimes we get into this place of we were just having this call on one of my group calls on Monday. We were talking about um, I said, this sounds really morbid, maybe morbid, but those people that we envy, at some point they are going to retire. They're going to be like, you know what? I'm 78 years old. I'm going to go lay on a beach and drink Mai Tais. Like I'm going to retire, and it's going to be time for the next generation of industry leaders to take place and to be that for the next generation and the next generation. And so I think it's always important for us to get ready and stay ready, because we never know what that time is going to be. And if you know in your heart of hearts that you're supposed to be having a bigger impact and whatever that might look like, then it's time for us to step into that and start becoming that now, not
Right.
5 years from now, not 20 years from now. What do we get to start putting in place today to start taking ourselves there? And that clarity comes back to clarity. It's like, okay. And I love that question about, who do I envy? Because it starts to put in it starts to anchor in some ideas of what that might look like for you, and who do you get to become, right?
Right. Exactly. Well, and also it's not cheating to use a roadmap that someone else has presented. I mean, you're not going
I
to
love it.
copy them. You're not going to copy them like word for word. What you're going to do is make it your own. I mean, there's so many artists out there. Like, like if you take the art industry, like each artist kind of adds to the collective. And, just because someone, I don't know, I can't really remember a lot. Monet, like all the different impressionists,
Yeah.
like they each kind of created their own style. There's so many artists that are like that. It's growing. You're taking what was done before and making it your own. And I think we can do that for ourselves. We take what has come before us and then add our own spin to it.
Yeah, I was just posting the other day on Instagram that I was like, I just was scrolling through and I was like looking, I somehow I got trapped in some like the videos or whatever and watching these like amazing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there are so many brilliant people out in the world. Like I'm just like in awe of like, oh my gosh, did you know you can do this with a bottle and this was, I'm just like in awe all the time of just watching people's gifts being seen in this world. And so there's a plenty of room for all of our gifts to be seen. And so just, give yourself permission to be like, okay, today's the day. Today's the day I'm
Yeah.
going to make one more step into that clarity, one more step into that awareness and insight of just knowing. And the more we get that clarity, the more that we get in alignment, the more that we are gifted. And I'm going to say like almost like divine intervention. It's like bing, bing, bing. We were talking offline about like how long I've had my podcast. And I'm like, I never planned this. Like I never planned this, but then I was just open to the possibilities. And then it's like, and just literally 6 months ago, I fully understand why I'm doing this podcast. And I'm like, oh, but it took, I mean, it's over a year before I had that awareness, you know? So just allowing ourselves to be open to the possibilities and just taking the next best step is, is key here. So before we wrap up, okay, just, this has been so amazing. What is like one more little tip, trick, strategy that you can leave the listeners with?
If you're finding yourself procrastinating, there's something deeper. And so stop beating yourself up and actually get to the heart of what it is that is holding you back.
I love that. That's great. I think that's a great reminder for all of us, because sometimes when we go into procrastination mode, we're like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? And really it's just like, hey, it's just like a little awareness factor of like, okay, maybe just it's time to take a look, right? It's a little indicator that says, okay, it's almost like on your car, like the indicator light that says like warning, like, hey, it's just a little indicator light that says, hey, bing, bing.
Low tire pressure.
Oh, tire pressure. You might want to check that, right? Like, so, I love this. Okay. So Becca, this has been fantastic. Where can people connect with you?
So you can find me at beccaribbing.com. That's BECCARIBBING. And I'm sure it'll be in the show notes.
Perfect. I love this. Well, thank you so much. I look forward to staying in touch with you and connecting with you and maybe having some more random off-colored conversations of, random knowingness in the world. So thank you so much for being you. And thank you so much for helping people to these transitions, because like this is, we need more people that are stepping into their knowingness and their power and really having an impact on this huge transition that we're going through right now in this time. And so thank you for the work that you're doing.
I am so grateful that you joined me for this episode. If you've enjoyed this, then there's just one thing that I would like you to do. Click to subscribe and leave me a rating and review. As my way to thank you, let's connect for a free consultation. Just reach out to me at Talking With Teri, that's TERI.com, to book your time.